good Sunday morning from the Bass. I'm Sylvia Carmen Cubina, Executive Director of the Bass, and I would like to give you a warm welcome to Curator Culture. This is our last Curator Culture of the season. And before we begin, I would like to thank our sponsors, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as additional support from Art Bridges for this series. Curator Culture has been amazing this year because it's allowed us to partner with other cultural organizations, as well as harness the amazing diverse voices that have helped us navigate this very challenging and complicated year. It's allowed us to access people who are our colleagues in the field from all over the world, and today is not an exception. So I would like to now begin and introduce our Curator of Public Programs, Tom Healy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. And hello, everyone. What time is it? It is 11 a.m. here in Miami, but it's 10 p.m. in Jakarta, 5 p.m. in Kassel, Germany, 10 a.m. in Bogota in Colombia, and we hope from many other time zones you're joining us. I bring up this mention of time and place because we are having a very special conversation with a number of people from different collectives around the globe, and we're calling our conversation today Out of Time. We all have these questions about what time it is and what time it's been during this COVID crisis and really staggering change and difficulty people have been in, but also a real extraordinary time of creativity and healing that a number of people have been through. And we're going to have a really lively conversation in just a minute. I do want to mention that there is a interpreter today from English into Spanish, and there will be a live transcript available for today's program. But let me just say, there are two quotes about time that I've written in my notebook and think about. And one was a proverb that was told to me in Senegal, and it was said, bees have to move very slowly to stay still. And another is a quotation from Borges, the writer. It said, being with you and not being with you are the only ways I have to measure time. And that sense of being together is really important to today's conversation because we're going to be talking with different artists who represent collectives. And so at a time where there's often such focus in certain kinds of discourse, certain kinds of communities in who's the individual, who's in charge, all the people today work in collectives. So they will be speaking as themselves, but also connected to vast communities of other artists. And one of those people will be Farid Rakun, who is with a collective in Indonesia called Ruangrupa. And Ruangrupa will be the lead curators this next year, a year from now, of the Documenta 15 that takes place in Germany, one of the most important art exhibitions that began after World War II as a time of healing after the war. And Ruangrupa has taken that same approach of a belief of healing today's injuries half a century later. And we'll also be joined by Camila Ramírez from INSTAR in Havana, and Ana Garzón Sabogal, who's joining us from the beautiful Pacific coast of Colombia. And we'll be led by a conversation with our own Leilani Lynch, who is the curator here at the Bass Museum. So welcome, everybody.
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Hi, Anna. Hi, Camila and Farid. It's nice to share the screen with you. And Tom, thank you so much for that kind of invocation of the reason for our gathering today. As you said, we have members joining the conversation from Colombia, from Cuba, from Indonesia. So we're really, I'm so thankful to have this international conversation, even in times of crisis, which is sort of what we'll be touching on a bit. But I thought before we sort of jumped into this conversation about how we each are individually handling that within our own kind of personal or collective practices, I thought maybe Farid, we can make sort of the network that brings us here a little bit more visible, because part of, you know, what Tom mentioned was that ruangrupa is organizing the next documenta, and part of the sort of ethos behind that is this concept of lumbung, which is you can hopefully share more about what that idea is and sort of how that extends to have us be with Anna and Camila today as well.
Thank you very much, Leilani, and also Tom and the Bass, and of course Anna and Camila for being here right now. To start answering your question, Leilani, but I can go, of course, long about this, especially also with Anna and Camila, because we're working together for Documenta 15 and hopefully Lumbung after the beyond the 2022, the Documenta 15 itself. But to start answering your question in a short version, maybe it's like Lumbung is a vernacular term for Indonesian. Every Indonesians, almost, if not all Indonesians, would know what Lumbung is. But we've been using this metaphor, let's say, directly translated, it's a rice barn. But we've been in back home here in Jakarta. I'm from Jakarta right now, so good evening from me to everyone. We've been using it to kind of like practice as well as experiment with the notion of collective governance of resources, but like collective of collectives. So it's not only ruangrupa, but with others as well. And then while we're doing it, we had the opportunity to propose something for Documenta to be chosen, whether like, you know, we're going to be the artistic director or not at that moment. And then we were thinking to just like tell Documenta what we were undergoing at that moment and invite Documenta back, whether they're interested in being part of this practice experiment and be part of our ecosystem, let's say. And then they said yes, and then we started thinking of like how to see ourselves and our ecosystem as well as Documenta as part of our ecosystem as a bank of resources, and then how we can share it to practices that kind of like us, you know, like we've been doing things for a while. This year it's 21 year. We're 21 year old in ruangrupa, and then our type of practice like have been largely invisible, especially in stages like Documenta, for example. And then we're not alone, we're not exclusive in it. And we started by inviting what later known as Lumbung members. And then I think Camila and Anna, Camila from INSTAR from Cuba, and then Anna is from Más Arte Más Acción, or MAMA in short, from Colombia. They're part of that Lumbung members, let's say. So what we're interested in is actually inviting practices that are locally rooted, so they're kind of like vital for their ecosystem, wherever and however they translate that ecosystem is, and then we want to learn from them as well. So Lumbung is not the overarching theme, let's say, but it's actually like a protocol for us to learn from each other, including ourselves. We're not the only one holding the remote control, let's say. So from there, I think like, yeah, we can continue conversation. I hope it started to answer your question.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's great. And kind of setting the stage for how we're all connected. And I wonder if from Camila and Anna, you can kind of share your experience as being now connected to this network and how you might balance what you do locally, you know, for your own communities, which are very different, of course, more urban, more rural, in different countries, with kind of this connection to an international group. Maybe Camila, you can kick it off.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation here. I'm very glad to be with you. Well, I am a visual artist, and I am one of the coordinators of INSTAR, Institute of Artivism, Hannah Arendt, here in Havana. And actually, the Institute emerged as a space for civic literacy and for independent culture. It was founded by Tania Brugueras, a very important Cuban artist. And since 2015, we have been working to develop a more democratic space and a cultural, inclusive, diverse space in Cuba. Our context is very complicated. We live in a totalitarian system. So it's very important for us. It kind of has been developed as a tradition, collective work, because it is somehow the only protection we have to strengthen community and to work each other with when anyone is available. So the Institute is this space, this platform, which is completely open to collaboration. And somehow we are like a refugee for independent artists and for independent culture, and obviously for civic society. We decided to put our human and economical resources to support other projects and to somehow rebuild this tissue, this human and intellectual tissue that has been abandoned for many years now in Cuba. So this invitation to Documenta was amazing, because it's exactly what we have been doing. And it's very important in the context to have international reference of practice like this. Actually, is one of our most important missions. We have been developing for 2 years, 3 years, pedagogical project, inviting artists, activists, intellectuals, academics from different parts of the world, so we can construct our own context and understand our context, our needs, our risk, everything from other experience too, because even when we live in a very isolated context, that makes even more important to understand how the world works and how we can take different strategies of survival and of cultural resistance in this time. I think it's actually something that everyone in the world is looking for, no? And the pandemic showed the vulnerability of us as human beings. So we put in perspective all of this, and this year we have been working online and looking for create an archive of memory, of independent cultural memory, art, civic society, and it has been great. I think the best work of understand our art and activism these days is precisely that, like creating a network of collaboration and put everyone's potential in function of think a new, a different, a better society.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Anna, I wonder if you could also share your perspective from where you're working.
Yeah, good morning to everyone. Thank you to join us. Regarding Más Arte Más Acción, the work of the organization starts in 2011 on the Pacific coast of Colombia, where are the biggest population of Afro-Colombian communities and indigenous. In that context also, there is a rich, biodiverse ecosystem in that region also. So the questions that rise Fernando Arias and Jonathan Collin, the founders of Más Arte Más Acción at the moment, was to think about the notion of utopia related to environmental issues, and trying to root those questions through the Space to Reflect project. That was our residency program that invite people to think about these two things. And during the process, we start to invite people. Oh, I have to mutate my phone without. In that moment, it was super important for everyone in the organization to start to create spaces for critical thinking, and not only production. That was more like the kind of way of the boom of residencies in Colombia were more based on that. And without this pressure of production, and also at that moment, Más Arte Más Acción became part of Arts Collaboratory Network, which also ruangrupa is part. And it was super important, that process, not only for the sustainability and funding process, but for learning together and for changing as well the power relations that are created through the funding, but also how we replicate those kind of things in the community art world or the communities where we are part of. So the process of paradigm shifting Arts Collaboratory put us into these learnings that, for example, practice like ruangrupa, cráter invertido, kunchi, 705, even Casco that works more based in commons, Platoedro, Kertiosan, were discussing things of how to reorganize, self-organize, how to redistribute, how to subvert this notion of North and South. And that affects us as Más Arte Más Acción a lot, because the practice were very into more individual and sometimes community project based, but not thinking how to survive together as well in the practice of in the art context. So also the learnings of the Nueva Topias program that was from 2011 and 2016, we start to work with the notion of Chocó as a school, which is creating this kind of notion of ecosystem that was also implied inside of AC, and how to sustain together our practice as artists, but also we see that our lack of resources was not at the moment financially, but was more the pertinence of our work in a geographical place as Chocó. So in that moment, we start to work more with the local collectives in Nuquí, in Quibdó, in Buenaventura, recognizing what are the cultural process that are moving as well, process, cultural exchanges and production that actually, because of also the structural violence and racism in Colombia, are not part of the hegemonic scene in Colombia. So they are not recognized as an artist, as a filmmakers, as a dancers. They are always community filmmakers, but not to participate in a broad scenario. So through Más Arte Más Acción, we have been pushing as well this discussion. And we think now that our sustainability rely also in the sustainability of these collectives, and that's why we are focused now. And when the invitation also from ruangrupa to be part of the Lumbung came into a moment of transition of Más Arte Más Acción, rethinking the way that we are organized itself, the institution, and internally in MAMA, even though that we are a very small organization, we can see how also these power relations affects the way that we relate to the ecosystem. So we are also in the middle of being supportive with the collectives, but inside also in transitioning.
Yeah, I mean, I think, kind of the spirit of reorganizing and shifting during this time, although I think we can speak about many different type of crises. I think, Anna, you shared with me a text by Paco Gomez Nadal, in which he was saying, from living in permanent crisis mode, an engine of creativity and change can emerge. And I'm wondering if any of you want to respond to that, or maybe if you have thoughts about if that's romanticizing the idea of crisis, or if it is something that drives your work.
I would like to start that text is very inspiring for our work. I think because the place where we work in Chocó is, even though that is a biodiverse hotspot and there is like a lot of richness in the cultural sphere and the ethnical groups are giving a lot of ways of living there, there is also a lot of pressure in the way of living of the people there, no? Like the mining is affecting so much, the drug trafficking is affecting so much the ways of living, the land conflict we have, like from 60, 100, 60 years, that is like the conflict that we have with the guerrillas, but this has been like from the colony. This has been a crisis territory, and we haven't seen a flourishing of the culture in other levels that the urban spheres are putting those kind of pressure there, no? So even though there are a lot of imaginative practice and the collectivity is one of the biggest practice for surviving in the territory, and I think we have kind of perspective of what could be a left or a progressive movement, but we never see how has been doing the struggles of the Black community in Colombia and even indigenous as well. And they have been reaching a lot, actually, because of that kind of opacity, but also the main struggles and strikes has been very successful, but we always see like the more traditional, no? We see how Chile is doing, how Argentina is doing, how Mexico is doing, but we didn't realize that the Black community and indigenous community in Colombia have a lot of creative tools, even for the urban struggles. And now that we are in a moment of protests and demonstrations on the street, I think it's a moment in which the people start to see how the Black community have been moving and making from the basis something that now is more creative and more powerful, that teaches a lot. So I think that I will not romanticize the crisis, but it's like I haven't seen, for example, Colombia never in peace, no? And I see just a meme during this morning that was like an old woman of 100 years talking with a young guy saying like, yeah, we never have been living in a peace land, no? So we don't have that kind of notion of stability. So yeah, we have to look for something flourishing from whatever kind of crack.
Yeah. Farid or Camila, do you want to also respond?
Yeah, it's the same in Cuba. I think we live in a constant critical moment. No, it doesn't look sometimes like that from outside because violence is not too obvious. We live in a restricted, I mean, in a system where it's completely restricted basic human rights, but it's not. And civic and political rights cannot be exercised on public spaces. So, and the government is all the time repressing those practices by very secret and careful ways. We live in a very convulsed emotional and psychological situation. No, citizens are harassment. When people tries to speak freely about what they think or they are critical with the government, they immediately make a target for the security of state. So it's very hard to have any discussion in community. In the last time, since we have internet access from 4 years ago, appear independent journalism, which is illegal in Cuba, but internet allows us to develop this practice and to get information about the world and to open consciousness about our situation and the world. And since then, community has been very active, like discussing and trying to make change on society and trying to defend their rights. So it's kind of the same that in every context is different, but in Cuba we are very used to crisis. Economical crisis is a reality every day. So we are fighting with that. And art is somehow a place when you can resist, when you can exercise freedom of speech and show like new ways to understand society and act in society when is with the absence of all these other rights. No, it gives you a new space, an imagination space to be creative. And this critical situation is very hard, but at the same time, people develops a huge imagination to confront crisis and to bring together and develop a very human way and a very human sense of being together, no? And the importance of being together.
Yeah, just to add to that, maybe it's like just very short, I think, like learning to survive like that. I think for us in Indonesia, at least, or in Jakarta, it gave us kind of like there's no illusion of safety, let's say, from the state or from the system itself, or system can mean like the art market or the art ecosystem or the art institutions, etc. By not having that, I think like all of us right now learn to build our own reality, let's say, or realities, because it's different, so pluriverses. So I think like yeah, of course, crisis is not something that we wish for, but a lot of times because of there's no that illusion, that's why I said it's illusion, because a lot of times like in much more established context, they're just like that safety is almost like an illusion, like if not almost, it's an illusion. And then the pandemic, for example, showed how precarious or how elusive it is, so a lot of us don't have that. So I think that brings us, or automatically, or it's our nature to take or claim something as our own. So we build infrastructures ourselves. We call ourselves, like, we build our own audience, even, like, all those kind of stuff. And then the last thing I want to say is like we work in so much less competitive situation, so we're not competing between each other. So I think that's positive side of where we're at right now. For example, if Ruangrupa was founded in somewhere else, like in much more established context, then we wouldn't be here right now. It would be so easy to dismiss us as, I don't know, to fall into a category, like alternative, just being labeled alternative, for example, and it's done. We've never been alternative because there's no mainstream to begin with, let's say. So that's it. That's all I want to add. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think, yes, not alternative, I think, is an important thing to point out. I do want to get into kind of how each of you kind of build the systems that you're working in. And I know, ruangrupa has this notion of hanging out, and also education systems a bit as well. And maybe you can, I know you just spoke, Farid, but say more about the spirit of hanging out and kind of how that brings about new knowledge that might be opposed to certain educational systems or more formal ways of organizing.
Yeah, thank you for the question, because like that's a good segue, I think, because I wanted to ask that question as well to Anna and Camila, because like for Anna, it's like Shokwe at school. And then for Camila, like you've been building, like INSTAR has been building this like educational or pedagogical, I don't know which term you're comfortable with, because even school is problematic, a lot of people have problems with these terms. So we can continue with on that. But like for us, that's why we built Good School with other collectives as well, Serum and Grafis Suruhara back here in Jakarta, because at that moment we were in 2018, actually, we established it in the end of 2018, because after a while we kind of like realized that we've become like all of us, not only Ruangrupa, but all of these collectives in Jakarta, we've become, after a while, we've become something that can be transferred. And then a lot of times we actually, like for myself, I learned a lot from being in hanging out with Ruangrupa and Serum and Grafis Suruhara without realizing that I've been in school, you know, but I've learned so much as an individual. And then the question becomes like how to share ourselves to others. At the first time, we were thinking of like the context, of course, is in Indonesia. Then we talk, you know, same language, etc., etc. Then a lot of times, this knowledge we found out that can be transferred through a very informal way of doing things. Making events is one, but like spending time and wasting time with each other is another. So there's no like pressure of productivity. So we just like be together because we enjoy each other. That's much more important. And then without seeing it as investment in time, we're actually investing in each other. But like maybe investing is not a good term. But I just like, for now, I cannot think of any other term. But basically that, like trusting each other that we're going somewhere without agreeing beforehand of where we're going, let's say. So that's why hanging out, wasting time with each other is very important for us. And then, yeah, let's say I can stop there and continue or extend the question to Anna and Camila of like why do you think something like education or something what you call as a term, other terms would be welcome as well? Why is it important for us practicing in art, let's say?
I can go. Actually, Chocoasa School is more like an internal notion. This is not like something that is totally open to the public or is part of a specific program, but it's more like the spirit of the different lines of work that we have at the moment in MAMA. And I think at the beginning that there is a lack of resources for accessing to learn and practicing art in the Pacific region. And through the different kind of activisms, through the different production, we have learning by doing as well, no? And also, it's a disposition when we do our residency program, the people not only come to extract Choco, because as there is a lot of crisis there in terms of environmental issues, racial, gender, there is a lot of NGOization in the territory. So people have this tendency of going to Choco for tourism or for extracting through the different kind of programs that are designed the urban zones, and then they go there. So how we go to a disposition of learning and not to say to the people what should be done, because this is the way of creating development or progress, no? And because it's like to see something else beyond the, I don't know, the sustainability objectives of the UN or something like that. This is kind of the measures that are used by the NGOs in territories where the paradigm of development is not that. It's more based on living joy, living well-being, or this kind of other cosmological ways of addressing life. And that's why we call Choco as a school, and it's a kind of capacity for listening, for being affected of what is that territory and the people, no? And all the process as well have become kind of schools, because, for example, when we start to work with Postcards from the Future, we wanted to do documentaries between two territories. They are filmmakers, but they have learned by themselves. So we took this opportunity to learn together how to produce more quality or with a more impact the documentaries we have done. So this is a process that we have doing during 5 years, producing by learning as well, by questioning the way that we organize that space of learning, and even understanding who can teach, who is the beneficiary, why always the producer has to be just being beneficiary and not be paid because the students have not been paid, and like questioning as well who lives, who can live or receive an income based on projects, no? And those kind of things were super crucial for understanding the ways of organizing and producing based on the local practices, no? And we learn a lot that, and that has shaped as well the way that we work inside of MAMA during these last 4 years, no? Also, for example, doing activism against the port, we make a Nuki alliance with different NGOs, with different ways of working, with different targets and objectives, but we become in a common struggle, and we have learned from law strategies, from artistic practices that we are putting there as well. We are learning a lot about environmental specificities of the territory, and has become a learning process through Chocó as a way of learning, a place for learning, no? So I think that's the way that we have learned, and I think it's also based in totally in conversation and listening. And that is the only way to create that kind of trust that we are doing something different that is beyond a program and objectives and indicators. That is the way that always the people relate to Chocó, no? I think more or less from that.
Well, in our case, we think ourselves as a living organism. Tanya likes to say that, as a living organism, because we are all the time acting in context. When we talk about pedagogical or educational process, we don't think that in a traditional way. We think that because we live in a context where education is very, very restricted, where we must go through a process of unlearning almost everything we have known until now, because we live in a context which is very intolerant, and when there is the free democratic spaces for talk openly about everything. So we have created a lot of vicious, a lot of limits to understand each other and to be able to discuss each other. So we think education, civic education, in that way, in the way that we can sit down all together and talk openly and honestly about things and learn from each other, which is the most important thing. We don't think education as a process when someone gives and the other one receives. It's an exchange of experience, and actually we learn more from experience than from strategies already created or traditions. We are learning all the time by doing things, is the way it works. And when we talk about education, we are talking also of reconstruct a memory, a cultural memory of society, because we are all the time acting like we are starting from the beginning, because in a totalitarian context, memory is completely erased all the time, and independent narratives are all the time banded, erased. So we think we need to educate ourselves in trying to preserve individuality in order to construct a collective dynamic, and of course have reference, because we cannot be starting every time from the beginning. So this is what we call education or pedagogical, actually an horizontal way of communication, which is already very hard, and a way to learn from each other.
Yeah, I think that all of the practices that you all mentioned are something that, you know, working from my context in a museum is something to definitely we're further away from, you know, even thinking collectively. And so I appreciate the opportunity to learn from you. But with that and kind of with the struggles of this work, I wonder if you have, how do you cultivate, you know, care within these practices, whether they're, you know, more personal or working with an organizational. Yeah, does anybody have thoughts about that?
Camila, are you going to talk? Right, I saw your mic open.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's something that we learned a lot inside of Arts Collaboratory. That was part of the ethical principles that lead us into this paradigm shift as well. No, we weren't, and also maybe success of the feminist movement and thinking as well, that includes this kind of part in the organizing process, no? And we weren't aware so much of how care is important in the work we do, and even being like independent organizations that dedicate like full-time to the work, we never realized how intense could be working in this human level, no? So how to even put the life in the middle beyond the art production has been super relevant. And I think that's also learnings from Choco in the rhythm of the life, no? Like people came to Choco with a specific project, very well detailed, they want to do this and blah, and we, as soon as they came, it's like, let you affect by the context, because probably the 40% of what you are planning is not going to be done, or even you are going to change totally your mind, because here the life is based on taking care, enjoying, talking. And I think we have been rushing in the way of managing, producing, and taking care of others, and we have to have been forced to balance that, because, for example, in the moment of the pandemic arise, we have to decide of giving the money for the art production or giving the money to the ecosystem to survive during this time. And it was super important to move in that way, no? Like, let's not produce in this moment, even virtual conferences or yeah. We were pushing to, because many of the money we have for programming were attached for a program, no? But we say, okay, let's do it as much easy to spread the money in where it's needed. And also inside of AC, we dedicate some part of the money that the last year we didn't make an assembly, so we distribute that money as an emergency fund for the ecosystems. And I think the mutual aid is, I think, the way of trying to balance, no? Inside of Mama, actually, we have been struggled as well, how to organize ourselves and not put us as well in precarity because of the time of the amount of work we do as a small team. And we are also in this journey and transition process that is like the freest space where we have for transitioning into a more collective decision process. And we have support by our counselors and people that help us to think how to move, because sometimes we are super tied to our own set of values and ways of living and positioning different things. So it has been very interesting to also invite people from outside to help us to think as well, because sometimes we are super attached of from our experience in the organization and ways of doing that help us to breathe as well. And I think that is very important, but also I think always to put the amount of things that we do, no? Like now we have been in Documenta, and Also from Arts Collaboratory, we become more visible, and the tendency of doing more and more and more and participate in everything. And we have always to come back to what we do, what we wanted to invest our time, how we wanted to do it in very well done and dedicated, and not to try to be in everywhere. So we have to also come back to these core team discussions to decide how to distribute as well time. I think that's important for care.
Yeah, I think on that, if you don't mind me talking, Camila.
No.
Or I think like what I can add a little bit is like first time, yes, as Anna said, because we learned a lot from like just like observing how Mama has changed over the years as well. You know, like of course they do things differently than us. That's why it's actually exciting. The context is different, the responsibility is different, the possibility is different, etc., etc. And then for us, time is very, very important, because like a lot of times, as Anna touched upon before as well, it's like a lot of times time is understood as money, you know. So it's very, very productive, the understanding of time. And I think we need slowly but surely need to change that, because if we want to care for each other, especially also for ourselves, you know, we have to give that time. Like we shouldn't ask everyone to be transactional in our relationship, because if that's the case, then we're being a collective, being like, you know, doing things horizontally, all those kind of stuff is just like not the best way to do it. We're just going to hit walls and after walls after walls. That's why we're doing things the way we do things, you know, because of that, because we want to free time out of that burden, let's say, as much as we can, because through time as well we learn that these changes happen, could only happen incrementally, not like as a sudden, not as a revolution, let's say, you know. So I think time is very important. The other thing is like that bilateral transaction is very, very dangerous. Like, you know, a lot of times relations between these functions, like artistic director, curators, artists, institution, like you name it, you know, usually it's like that. Like we ask you to do something, and then we're going to give you a remuneration or something, you know. So we're buying services, but that type of relations are actually not sustainable, not sustaining the relations itself. And then by that, it's actually like it makes care is impossible, you know, like so to a certain extent, like we can represent care, or we can even like talk about care, but not practicing it. I think like that's another thing, like that's another level of practicing, not only doing representations or talking about, you know. So I think in that way, it's like it's difficult. It's really difficult to design that care. It can only be practiced when the need has come. Let's say we can prepare it beforehand, but like as best as we can. But to do it in time is actually kind of like the key to it. I think that's it. I've talked too much. Sorry, Camila, if you want to add more, please.
No. Actually, what you were saying is very similar to the way we operate. We actually work just by coordinating people. Our work is very simple. We are a platform, and we are actually work to empower other people, to give them what they need to make their own project. And we participate of those dynamics, helping wherever they need. but we are like that. Our program is basically awards, residencies, and put our capital to empower other people with no conditions, just by collaborating and working together. So it's the same. We are like a very peaceful space. We only give the space and the support, and so people can function wherever they want.
Thank you. I think it's hard to believe the hour is passing by already, but I wanted to invite Tom back on to field any Q&A from the audience at this time. Hi, Tom.
Sorry about that. Hi, thank you, Leilani. Wow, this has been just such a powerful, fascinating conversation. Anna, I wanted to ask you a question that's come up, and it's obviously relevant to all of you, but your own organization is Más Arte Más Acción, like más, more, like more art, more action. So the question is, there's also a lot of social and social justice action, climate change without art. And so what is missing from those efforts where art is not part of the action?
I think the political context in Colombia has been super evident in numbers, evident in violence, and actually based on a conversation as well we have with a Pichapong, that he was super impressed when he came here and he see that everyone is talking about the murders, about the injustice, and there is a lot of conscience, and super shocked because in Thailand he cannot talk that explicit as they would like to. I see that kind of images and evidence of the violence and the inequality has creating kind of anesthesia in the sensibility of the people. And I think art is a powerful tool. I don't want it to make it just a utilitarian approach of the art, but create another kind of spaces for thinking the problems, no? Not only from based on arguments but feeling and putting each other in another place, no? And trying to move our sensibility to something else, no? So for example, just to give an example, in the struggle that we have fighting against the port, we see that the discussions against the port always are super technical about the income, the progress, the development of a region. But when we put the documentaries that we have made with the collectives there in a big debate where arguments are, the sphere of the discussion changed totally. And sometimes we have the possibility to show one or two or three or the whole program of documentaries. Sometimes we cannot. And depending on how it's moving the conversation, we put these documentaries, and the people think something that they missed in the conversation that are not part of numbers, of technicalities, of ways of deciding just by the hard arguments, no? So I think that is a way of creating another kind of sensibility, because we have here struggles against mining, murdering the environmental leaders, and we see numbers every day in the news, in the social media. But I think even though in this strike, the art has become a great way of addressing the other people that don't realize the level of inequality that the country is living. So that has been a way of doing our work, and actually we are not so much doing this, not like in the port resistance or against the mining of the Trato River. We are small groups trying to offer another tools, and the people are starting to think, for example, that Trato River is a biocultural right, a sentence to protect the river against the mining. And this kind of notion came because the collectivity are addressing problems through artistic and cultural activities, no? So I think this kind of notion even become part of laws. So, and it's part of also this transition for a peace process. is like how art can be also part of the truth, no? That is not saying in legal terms, it's saying in other kind of narratives. So I think it's super powerful for us to create another kind of sensibility.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So I have another question that's come up, and Farid, it's directed to you, but I think it also is for everyone. You talked this very powerful philosophical thing you just said, that we want to free time of its burden. And one way, what you've all been doing is you kind of threw out our whole question that we put this conversation together with, of what happens if, how relevant can an art exhibition be if you've been planning it for years? And the whole process you've talked about, by learning, by doing, and growing a collective, is not about trapping something in time and having art have a result. But at the same time, you're curating Documenta, which does open in a year. And so obviously a lot of the work of these years of growing that collective internationally and things and learning is part of that. But it also seems like we're coming to you from a museum that has a kind of traditional way of showing shows, and you're all breaking that kind of way of seeing art.
Yeah, thank you for that poignant question, Tom. That's almost like our everyday, almost, because weekends, we're in the name of care. On weekends, as much as we can, we have to rest, you know, but that's why it's almost every day. But it's almost everyday struggle for all of us. And I think Anna and Camila and their friends as well in Mama and INSTAR, they're in it together with us as well right now, of like trying to make that type of understanding, even like how to understand an exhibition, you know, as you said as well, or how to create a different type of experience for audiences, if there's any audiences, all those kind of stuff. We're rethinking all that kind of stuff right now. But then, of course, because something like Documenta is part of our ecosystem, so they come out, of course, with their traditions, cosmology, etc. No, so what we're doing right now is to make that process happen. I think like a lot of times I got reminded by my friends, a lot of it are invisible works and boring works, and it's like, you know, grueling works actually, like, and it's almost impossible to get aestheticized, you know, to make exhibition out of this process, for example. That's kind of like almost ridiculous. But the point is to do this work because like we are in a position to do this right now, because we have to be honest, we're coming from a certain type of context, no, and history and tradition and habits as well. Our habit is not, as you said, you know, like that's why we also kind of like from the beginning, the intention is to make this lumbung to go beyond Documenta 15. So Documenta 15 is a very important stop of this journey together, but this is not going to be the only stop. So I think that's that kind of stuff, like how to negotiate, how to find middle ways, how to understand everyone, how to listen to a lot of things at once, and then by making it to go beyond, or at least in intention, hopefully it will work. If not, then we fail ourselves, let's say. But to go beyond 2022 gives us more kind of like breathing space in that, you know. Of course, Documenta is Documenta. You have to present something that's kind of like come with the plate, let's say, you know. But how to play with it, how to play with the request, how to play with the tradition, how to play with the expectation, all those kind of stuff. We're doing it together right now. We're doing it together with Anna and Camila and Mama and INSTAR, among others, you know. So we're thankful for that. And then, yeah, like there are a lot of ways to answer it. There's no one way to answer it, and because it's in the middle of the process. This is why we are doing it in the first place. Hopefully, we can share it with the public in 2022, where we're at that moment. Maybe that's
Right.
much as I can say.
Wonderful, thank you. As a certain American president we know who spent a lot of time growing up in Indonesia, we're talking about the fierce urgency of now. So Camila, I have a question for you that's come up. You know, so many of the collectives that are connected togetherness do some very hard work in dangerous circumstances. You know, there's censorship, there's difficulty. It's been impossible for people not to see the door behind you. And it's a very powerful image, both of the openness to the community in which you engage, but also the sense that, you know, you're not protected from other things. And so the question was about how do you engage when you have this risk of on so many levels?
I don't know. you only engage yourself. It's a personal decision, and I think it's based on the strain you feel when you have a lot of people with you desiring and thinking about the same things and looking for the same ideas of justice, of freedom, whatever. So those contexts of repression, of censorship, somehow are very difficult. It's not, of course, what we want, is what we are fighting for live. But at the same time, you need to accept that's the reality, and you need to learn how to then go all over the logical of the system and create new creative ways of survival. And it's the only way you can be you can feel safe, being together with people who thinks like you, and who wants, obviously, to create spaces for everyone. It's very difficult. It's very exhausting. The reward is that you know you are doing something that can be productive, and you are doing something based on love, on tolerance, and you are looking for that. There is nothing wrong with that, and everyone should commit to defend that. So it's difficult, yeah, but at the same time, it's a good training to appreciate even more what freedom looks like, or should looks like, what love means, what tolerance means, and why all those things are so important for human being. No, is critical moments are the best to understand what is really important, and you are working all the time on that logical.
Thank you. I don't think there's a more eloquent way for us to end this powerful conversation than that. There are two questions we'd like to close out with that are more practical. One actually is thank you for this important talk. How can we get in touch with you and your organizations? I've visited your websites and interested. I've done work with Andean and Amazonian women and their work in Peru. What are practical ways for other people to engage in your networks and collectives?
I think like for now, because like this is recorded and I don't know who will see this, so the safe way to do it is like to get in touch with the organizer of this talk, and then we'll be happy. I think like we're, at least for myself, it's we'll be happy to hear from you through email or through, I don't know. Yeah, the website also has contacts in it. So for me at least, I cannot talk for Anna and Camila, of course, but like for me, that's like, it's okay. But it's just like not safe to pronounce our email address in here. I'm just like aware of that safety in the internet right now.
Yes. Okay. And then one more powerful question. Do any of you see indications that those in power in arts institutions and social justice, otherwise, are reconsidering the structure and budgets of their institutions, such as paying staff and living artists more in developed countries, quote unquote, like the US, as well as in developing countries where you all work? Do you see institutional practice reflecting the values you have in your collectives? I think is that in terms of practical ways of a living wage, for example.
Yeah, I can start maybe if Anna and Camila don't mind answering that. For me, it's like curatorially or textually, you know, like we can gloss over something as much as possible, like with great. It's like care as well, like, you know, like we can talk about care up until the end, but like the practice shows it. And then for me, a lot of times after organizing several things and managing and all those kind of stuff, running it as being in different places, artists, curators, managers, whatever, it's like a lot of times the Excel sheet shows the ideology the best. So it's kind of like if I want to work with an institution, that's the first thing I'm asking actually. Like, show me your Excel sheet, and then you don't need to tell me about your ideology. I can see it already. So that's the way I start. Maybe Anna and Camila have something to add.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, it's true. I think that's a very good skeleton of what is happening as well. And yeah, we sometimes we were questioning at the beginning because there were like a famous main artists coming to our residency, and the people start to questioning, okay, that is the only residency on the Pacific Coast, how the local artists can engage and how can participate, how can get a fee, and like all these practices that are well done by us, but just inviting a kind of hegemonic artists or main artists that we were interested in. And we were questioning, and it was super painful at that moment. And I think the work of restructuring has to pass some time for that place. Like we see how we confront racism, structural, and I think one of the things is the material conditions. We can talk about care, but if the material conditions are not really put in the center as well, it's just going to be the speech of the institution. So yeah, I think we have seen how our budget has been modified all the time, and during these years, like how we have transitioning into a more ethical practice in a territory where we are from outside and we have salaries but others don't. So that has been affecting a lot, and we expect as well that through Lumbung we can continue surviving together, not only for the practice but the living of the people that is part of our ecosystem as well. So I think that's fundamental for doing a change or a real paradigm, no? Shift.
Thank you. As Sylvia Jimenez, the director of the Bass, has said, budgets are moral documents. So to this question, deeply important to consider that effect on everyone. So even if we've tried to free time of its burdens, we're doing the talk, but you all walk the walk and do the work. And we are all so extraordinarily grateful for beginning us to open our horizons to see your work and be connected with you. We're very excited about what leads into Documenta, but as I think you've proven to us, it's more about the constant work of today and ongoing, and not simply an exhibition. So thank you. Leilani, we thank you for organizing this. Would you close us out with some final thanks?
Sure. No, I mean, I don't think I can say it any better. Just appreciate, extending time a little bit with everyone and working across time zones together. And yep, hope to keep the conversation going. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Muchas
Bye.
gracias.
Muchas gracias.